Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching once again. This video is going to contrast the way that the Jews are viewed in the Old Testament and in the Quran. Now I picked the Old Testament because this is where all of the harsh language is that Muslims will like to point to and say, look at how much God despises the Jews, he hates them, etc. And so in some respects, Islam is no different. So we're going to go through some of these passages, namely three books. We're going to look at Malachi, Hosea, and Jeremiah. Some of the harshest language there that God uses toward the Jews, and we're going to take a look at the bigger picture and see what's going on. After I knock down those Islamic objections, before they even get off the ground, we will move to the vast and disgusting history of Islamic anti-Semitism. So let's jump right into the text here. Malachi chapter 1. Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares the Lord, yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated. Now, we're talking specifically about the Jews here, but I wanted to throw this verse in Malachi in because it contains this word, hatred. Now, if you consult commentaries on this topic, at least commentaries that are critically engaged, they may say something like, the language that's used here is characteristic of ancient Near Eastern treaties, love and hatred. Now, we have some analogies to this in our modern practices and parlance. Perhaps a marriage where you love someone and so you have this covenant that goes along with that. Well, covenants were used similar to that, but also with some variation to that. But the love-hate language is associated with the covenant here, and specifically covenant protection. So God's people in the Old Testament were under covenant protection. And the commentators that say that this language is associated with ancient Near Eastern treaties are trying to get you to think that way. To be hated is to be rejected from the covenant. To be loved is to be accepted into the covenant. And if you're in the covenant, then you have covenant protection, namely from their enemies there in the contemporary ancient Near East. Now, these commentators aren't the only ones to say this. I mean, Paul said this 2,000 years ago. When Paul quotes Malachi 1 in Romans chapter 9, he does so in the immediate context of covenant language. He's talking about children of Abraham, children of God, and then he runs right into this quote from Malachi chapter 1. So it's associated with the covenant for him too. So this isn't some modern exegesis. It goes back to Paul, and then of course way before that into the ancient Near East itself. And Paul makes the point, he says this was God's sovereign choice, who the covenant would be through. The covenant was through Jacob. Jacob, God loved. Esau, he hated. Esau was not in the covenant. So it's a very odd way to think about this. You might think about it also as sort of an odd translation. But again, translators do the best they can, and there's a lot going on behind the text, both in the Hebrew and in the ancient Near East. So just as a preamble to this video, I wanted to let you know just at the beginning that there's a lot more to the love-hatred language than the strictly emotional sense in which we think of it. And we'll talk more about that as we go through Hosea as well. The same thing is true with love. If you love me, keep my commandments. This is the theme over and over throughout Deuteronomy, and of course, Jesus says the same thing in the gospel. So there's more to love than emotion. There's more to hatred than emotion. There's something else going on. And in a bit more technical jargon, which I'll use for the rest of the video, the words love and hatred have a broader or a wider semantic range. Okay, they're not strictly the emotional sense that we think of them today. All right, Hosea 9:15, because of all their wickedness in Gilgal, I hated them there. Because of their sinful deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will no longer love them. All their leaders are rebellious. Now, if hatred and love are associated with covenant protection or the removal of that protection, wouldn't it be nice to have something about the removal of covenant protection right here next to Hosea 9:15? And indeed, that's the case. 2 verses later, My God will reject them because they have not obeyed him. They will be wanderers among the nations. Now, wanderers among the nations, that refers to the exile. And of course, Israel went into exile under Assyria and never returned. Wanderers among the nations. The covenant protection was removed. They were hated. So you can see this correlation between the word hatred and the covenant. Hosea 1:9, we find some harsh statements against Israel. Then the Lord said, "Call him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your God." Now, again, this is very harsh language. And again, God's people, that's a theological construct. You're God's people not because you are of a particular lineage or ancestry or whatever. You're God's people if that's where your believing loyalty is placed in Yahweh. That's not the case with Israel, and God says, "You're not my people." But then in the next verse, "Yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will be called children of the living God." And in the next chapter, "In that day I will make a covenant for them, and I will have mercy on her who had not obtained mercy. I will say to those who were not my people, 'You are my people,' and they will say, 'You are my God.'" And this is the cycle that we see in the Old Testament. Judgment with a view towards restoration. Okay, Hosea 1, "Not my people." Hosea 2, "You are my people." And this is the cycle that we see throughout the so-called minor prophets. We see it elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible as well. I'm thinking mostly of Isaiah at this point. Hosea chapter 3, "The Lord said to me, 'Go, show your love to your wife again. Though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes." Now, obviously, that's a bit strange to our ears. It refers to some things back there in the ancient Near East. But what I wanted to point out is that love here in Hosea appears in very close proximity to hate. And God says he loves Israel, even though they are an adulterous nation. Yet he hates them. He loves them. They forsake him, but he hates them. So which is it? Well, it's both, because the semantic range is larger. It's bigger than how we think of love and hatred. Okay, so the two can exist side by side, and when they are hated, when covenant protection is removed, when they are judged, it is with a view toward restoration. Not God's people becoming God's people once again. Hosea chapter 6, "Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured us, but he will bind up our wounds." And one more from Hosea 11, "They will follow the Lord. He will roar like a lion. When he roars, his children will come trembling from the west. They will come from Egypt, trembling like sparrows, from Assyria, fluttering like doves. I will settle them in their homes, declares the Lord." So again, this sort of end view is the restoration of the relationship between God and his people. Now, love and hatred, perhaps in the Hebrew Bible, is not given in any closer context than in Jeremiah chapter 12. Verse 7, "I will forsake my house, abandon my inheritance. I will give the one I love into the hands of her enemies. My inheritance has become to me like a lion in the forest. She roars at me. Therefore I hate her." Verse 7, he loves her. Verse 8, he hates her. Israel has become like a roaring lion, viciously opposing Yahweh. And God finally says, "Okay, then I will just let you do what you want to do." And he lets the one he loves walk off into the hands of her enemies. Divine protection is removed. Israel is hated, but they are still God's beloved. But the judgment in the Old Testament, again, is always with a view towards the restoration of that covenant relationship between God and his people. "I will be the God of all the families of Israel. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I will build you up again. Sing with joy for Jacob. See, I will bring them from the land of the north and gather them from the ends of the earth. I am Israel's father, and Ephraim is my firstborn son." and again more on the eschatological vision of restoration. It is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. And of course, this was partially fulfilled in the book of Acts. There's a lot going on in the geography that points back to verses like this in Isaiah, this sort of universal eschatological restoration of Israel. And I like this verse because it's too small a thing to bring Israel back. Not only that, but God is going to bring the rest of the Goyim, the nations, back to himself. So there are a couple of propositions that I will bring up at this point from the text that we have read. And I think I've gone into it to sufficient depth to establish these points. Proposition number 1. Love and hatred have a wider semantic range in ancient Near Eastern usage than in modern English. This should be crystal clear by now. If it's not, you haven't been paying attention. The implication from this is that comparisons to the strictly emotional sense in which the term is used in modern English are anachronistic and simplistic. Anachronistic and simplistic. So when Muslims look at the New Testament, they say God is love, but then back here in the Old Testament, it says the word hate. You're being anachronistic and simplistic. I have clearly demonstrated, proposition number 1, that the semantic range of these words is much larger than in the modern sense in which they're used. Proposition number 2, the semantic range includes a removal of covenant protection. The implication here is that God is just and he judges sin. Proposition number 3, even removal of covenant protection is with a view toward restoration of the covenant relationship. Implication, the call to eschatological restoration is universal. And number 4, there is no legacy of anti-Semitism as a result of the Old Testament. All right, catch that. Christians in the first century, when they adopted the Hebrew Bible as their authoritative text, didn't look at these passages and say, well, these Jews are really filthy people. We should hate them. No, it's not how it worked. There is no legacy of anti-Semitism from the Old Testament. One more verse from Jeremiah, just to bring this kind of into the New Testament. Again and again, I sent my servants the prophets, who said, do not do this detestable thing which I hate. But they did not listen or pay attention. So whenever I read something like that from Jeremiah, it reminds me of what Jesus said in Matthew 21. You have the vineyard there in the Old Testament. The vineyard is a metaphor for Israel. And there's Jesus talking about the servants who were abused in the vineyard and so forth. And the owner of the vineyard doesn't just say, well, just kill all of the tenants. No, but he sends his own son. And there's Jesus giving his life not only for Israel, but for the rest of the nations. So it's quite a contrast with what you see in the Islamic sources, with the Islamic legacy of anti-Semitism. If you're a Muslim and you don't think that your religion has a history of anti-Semitism, I would recommend you read Andrew Bostom's volume, The History of Islamic, the Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism. It's 700-something pages. Quite a scholarly work here. And he quotes Al-Jahiz, who was a 9th century CE scholar. And the question that Al-Jahiz is addressing here is, why do Muslims hate the Jews so much more than the Christians? Yeah, they hate both, but they hate the Jews a lot more. The most potent cause of this particular animus toward the Jews is Surah 5:82. So this hatred of the Jews goes right back to the Quran. Remember that Muhammad initially had no problem with the Jews, and then they rejected him, and then he had a big problem with them. It went from, sure, you can do this and that like the Jews, to don't do anything like the Jews. I hate the Jews. You know, they're all going to burn in hell. We'll talk about some of those hadith very shortly. But after Muhammad was rejected by the Jews, then it's on. Then it's on, right? Then he starts revealing verses from Allah that just happened to coincide with his emotional state of hatred at the time. He says, and that their unbelief of the Jews must be the foulest of all, since they are the filthiest of all nations. Why the Christians, ugly as they are physically less repulsive than the Jews may be explained by the fact that the Jews, by not intermarrying, have not intensified the offensiveness of their features. The Jewish race, therefore, has been denied high mental qualities, sound physique, and superior lactation. The same results obtained when horses, camels, donkeys, and pigeons are inbred. That's very interesting. I wonder what YHWH would say here about the Jewish race that has managed to establish a state and a nation in Palestine and beat the Arabs in every battle of every war of the 20th century. It's ironic that the Jews can do this, given that they have been denied high mental qualities and sound physique, not to mention superior lactation. Okay, so yeah, enough of that nonsense. Let's look at a couple of these verses that are actually in the Quran and see where this anti-Semitism really began to take off. All right, actually, that's a picture of al-Husseini with Hitler. Okay, I actually meant to go to the Quran here. Okay, here we go. Surah 582, you will surely find the most intense of the people in animosity toward the believers, to be the Jews and those who associate others with Allah. And you will find the nearest of them in affection to the believers, those who say, we are Christians. That is because among them are priests and monks, and because they are not arrogant. That's a great verse from Allah there. Let's look at another one. This is... Actually, that's a quote from Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who says that he hopes that the next Holocaust will be at the hands of the Muslims. That's actually, I meant to go to Surah 541. Here we go. For them in this world is a disgrace, and for them in the hereafter is a great punishment. Now, this is just a sampling. There are some other ayat that you could look at, like Surah 261, 578, 564, 562, 65 through 66, 7, 166, 930, and 446. But of course, it doesn't stop there. Let's look at some hadith. I just can't resist reading this one. I've read it before. This is Sahih al-Bukhari, 3305. This is from the very prolific Abu Hurairah. He says, the Prophet said a group of Israelites were lost. Nobody knows what they did. But I did not see them, except that they were cursed and transformed into mouses or rats. For if you put the milk of a she-camel in front of a mouse or a rat, it will not drink it. But if the milk of a sheep is put in front of it, it will drink it. I told this to Ka'b, who asked me, did you hear it from the Prophet? I said, yes. Ka'b asked me the same question several times. No wonder. So Muhammad believed that the Jews were transformed into all sorts of creatures. Just about any creeping thing could be a Jew. Mouse, rat, gecko. This is why you get extra points with Allah if you kill a gecko with one strike. You get more points. I'm not going to talk about this stuff too much because it kills brain cells. So, I talked about in the Old Testament how there's this view of restoration of the relationship for the Jewish nation and for all nations. All right, that's in the Old Testament. Where's the view towards restoration of the relationship between the God of Islam and the people he created? Is Allah going to gather up all these mouses and rats and geckos, these Jews that he transformed into animals? Okay. No, that's actually not what's going to happen, because in Islamic eschatology, it was narrated that Abu Musa said, the Messenger of Allah said, when the day of resurrection comes, Allah, glorified and exalted as He, will give every Muslim, a Jew, or a Christian, that's me, and He will say, this is your ransom from hellfire. Okay, so there's your eschatology if you're a Muslim with respect to the Jews. They're all going to burn, and it's a ransom for a Muslim, because Muslims need to be ransomed from hell because Allah is forgiving. Wait a second. Sahih Muslim 7335. By the way, that was 7011 from Sahih Muslim. Perhaps number 49 or 2767. If you're looking it up on Sunnah.com, I'll move now to 7335, which is probably 2921 on Sunnah.com. It was narrated from Ibn Umar that the Prophet said, "Most certainly you will fight the Jews, and you will fight them until a rock says, 'O Muslim, here is a Jew, come and kill him.'" So I guess you fight all the Jews, and then some of the Jews hide behind rocks and in other hadith trees as well. And then you go and kill them, and then they're brought back up out of the dead, and then they're a ransom for a Muslim from hell. Jews really don't have a lot to look forward to in Islamic ideology. Now, let's do this one. This is a good one. If you're wondering how much, like quantify an Islamic ideology, quantify the worth of a Jew, I can do that for you. You want to make a Muslim run, pull out your manual of Sharia that you have studied intensely, every single word on every single page, and they praise Sharia law. And then you pull out your manual of Sharia and say, really, pick a flag, and we'll talk about it. And then they start running because they've never read their manual. They don't know what it says. But if they read it, they would know that it actually gives the value of the life of a Jew. The indemnity paid for a Jew or Christian is 1/3 of the indemnity paid for a Muslim. So, a Jew is worth 33% the amount of a Muslim. Now, on Facebook groups, I see Islamic Facebook groups, I see quotes by Ibn Qayyim, and they have like little balloons and flowers and things in the background, but I've never seen this quote from Ibn Qayyim. "The Jews are the cursed nation who Allah is angry with. They are the people of lies, fabrications, treachery, conspiracies, and are murderers. Usury and bribery, filthiest nation, have the lowest of characters, farthest from mercy, and closest to revenge. They have the habit of animosity and hatred." Now, if you ask me, Ibn Qayyim has the habit of animosity and hatred, but here he's, of course, pinning that on the Jews, as Muslims pin everything else on the Jews. So much has been the fault of the Jews, even spoiled food. Muhammad said that food would not spoil if it wasn't for those Jews. 4 propositions. Number 1, in the Quran and Hadith, Muslim-Jew hatred is purely emotional, bent on expulsion and annihilation. Expulsion initially from the Arabian Peninsula, as Muhammad clearly delineated to Umar, and Umar later did. And then annihilation in Muhammad's eschatology. The Jews will be ransoms for Muslims, they'll be killed, even the rocks and trees will give away the hiding place of these Jews, and they'll be killed in Muhammad's dream of the future. Number 2, there is no harmony of divine love, justice, and mercy in the Quran on this issue. Muhammad simply wielded divine approval for his anti-Semitism by revealing the words of Allah. The God of the Bible finds a way to be loving, just, and merciful, forgiving, and all of those divine attributes harmonize. Okay? Yes, God judges Israel for their sin because he's righteous. But in his mercy, he provides a way for them to come back into the covenant. If they choose, he sends them prophets. He offers them his love, his covenant protection. And the judgment is always with a view toward restoration. The passages we covered in Hosea are crystal clear on that. Restoration brings us to proposition number 3. There is no view whatsoever toward restoration, neither in the short term nor eschatological restoration in the Islamic worldview. The Jews are cursed, they're damned, end of story. Proposition number 4. There is a lengthy and atrocious legacy of anti-Semitism as a result of the primary texts of Islam. So there you have 2 contrasting views on the Jews. One in the Old Testament, God surely judges his people because he judges sin. But he also does this with a view toward restoration, restoring that covenant relationship. And he loves them with an everlasting love. Quite a contrast with the loads of anti-Semitic nonsense that are in the Quran and the Hadith, as well as the voluminous work by Dr. Bostom here with the legacy of Islamic anti-Semitism. So Muslims have a lot of answers to give on this topic. Perhaps it's nowhere more clear that the Quran is written by a man or multiple people than with the case here of the Jews. Muhammad suddenly decided to hate them and to do everything opposite the Jews once they continually rejected him. And once he gained the power, he was able to fight them, ambush them at first, conduct assassinations, and then later expel them from the Arabian Peninsula under Umar's rule. And at the precise time that Muhammad is developing this hatred because the Jews rejected him, these ayat start showing up in the Quran that echo Muhammad's feelings. Muhammad wanted some divine authority behind his anti-Semitism, and he got it with his so-called revelations from his so-called God. Muslims have a lot of questions to answer on these issues, and I'll be watching the comments section to see if there's any serious engagement with the legacy of Islamic anti-Semitism. Thanks for watching.